freedom, love, travel. The best fantasy video game in virtual reality, Chrono Life. You're welcome.
Get lost, idiot!
Our group doesn't accept beginners. Sorry.
Your equipment is weak. Come back once you've leveled up enough.
That's how the boy kept getting rejected every time he tried to join a group. This embarrassing situation really started to annoy him. He then thought that this game was terrible. That day, the city was calm and peaceful, until suddenly, the boy shouted that this game was a failure, a really awful one. But the people nearby thought that maybe this player had gone crazy, yelling like that all alone. All that just because no one had chosen him? The boy actually had good equipment for a simple beginner, but he didn't understand why he kept being rejected, even though he had spent a lot of money right from the start of the game. As he was about to leave, feeling completely defeated, a voice suddenly pulled him out of his thoughts.
Excuse me?
Are you talking to me?
Would you like to form a group with me?
Chrono Life really is the best game in the world.
After that unexpected encounter, our protagonist was walking with the girl through a forest. The girl found him really amazing, but the boy said it was nothing, because actually, he had just received his allowance and had invested a lot of money in the game. The girl then asked how much he had spent. The boy said she might be shocked, because he had already spent more than $40 since the beginning of the game, and had even obtained this two-handed sword as a bonus. The girl with a cute expression told him that he was really cool. But for our protagonist, those words were too much. His heart almost stopped from happiness. He was already imagining their future life as a couple, the moment he proposed, their wedding, and even their life together with a lovely little daughter. But suddenly, the girl stopped walking and said they had arrived. Our protagonist didn't really understand because there was no one and no monsters nearby. As he tried to make sense of the situation, the girl suddenly attacked him. The boy didn't understand what had just happened. He fell to the ground, still trying to figure out the situation, while also starting to lose energy. The boy then asked the girl why she had done that. Did she want his equipment? The girl, with a sinister smile, said,
I don't need your filthy gear, idiot. From the very beginning, my goal was to lure you here, away from everyone, to quietly eliminate you.
But you told me we'd make a team, didn't you?
And you actually believe that? Why would I team up with you? You're just worthless. Outside the game, I wouldn't even talk to someone like you. I'm sure in real life you're just a loser. And if you don't know how to play, at least make sure your equipment is decent. You only spent $40? That must mean your parents are poor, right?
After hearing that, the boy slowly began to stand up, despite his condition. He told the girl to shut her mouth. Insulting parents was crossing the line. But before he could even finish his sentence, the girl struck again and defeated him completely. The system suddenly informed the girl that she had fulfilled the requirements for a hidden class transition. Her hair began to change color. Her body shone brightly, revealing a new outfit and angel-like wings on her back. She sighed for a moment. She had just changed class and was now goddess of life. Smiling, she said to herself that she had finally reached 1,000 player eliminations. Joyful, she stretched a bit, while the body of our protagonist still lay on the ground. She even stepped on him as she walked away. But as she left, the boy slowly began to regain consciousness. That day, he finally understood the reality of this game. It was the law of the strongest. Meanwhile, back in the starting city, everything was as usual. In a quiet corner, the boy reappeared. His face was expressionless. He began to recall the girl's words and everything others had said to humiliate him since he joined the game. He stood still for a moment, then shouted in anger. Furious, he started searching through his bag and took out an enhancement hammer, a tool that could increase an item's stats by +1. He took out his sword and decided to enhance all his equipment. He started with his sword, since the fastest way to become strong was to upgrade everything he had. But to his surprise, his weapon was destroyed after a failed enhancement attempt. And that was only the beginning. He took off his gloves and tried again with another item. Failure. After many failed attempts, he ended up destroying all of his equipment. He couldn't believe how unlucky he was. He thought to himself that maybe it was time to quit the game for good. But just as he was thinking that, something pulled him out of his thoughts. He slowly lifted his head. In front of him stood an NPC, waving and greeting him. The protagonist was a bit annoyed. Why was this NPC jumping around in front of him for no reason? He looked at the wooden stick it was holding. It seemed like the NPC was trying to give it to him. He accepted it with the best bro smile in the world. Feeling humiliated, with all his gear gone and only his basic clothes left, he decided to try upgrading the wooden stick, just to see what would happen. After one strike, the system announced,
Enhancement successful. Wooden stick +1. Additional damage +1. Enhancement successful. Wooden stick +2. Additional damage +2.
Our protagonist wondered why life was so unfair. Only useless things seemed to have good luck. Well, if that was the case, he decided to just keep going.
Enhancement successful. Wooden stick +6. Additional damage +64.
All day long, he kept enhancing that same wooden stick. A few hours later, in the evening, his hands were trembling from frustration. He swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and struck one last time. It worked! He couldn't believe it. At that very moment, the system notified him that he had reached the maximum enhancement level for the wooden stick. He still couldn't believe it. A simple stick, yet he had achieved such a high success rate. Normally, beyond +10, the success rate drops below 5%. Suddenly, the stick slipped from his hands. He tried to catch it.
Whoa, 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 whoa!
And when it barely touched the ground, something impossible happened. What he saw next left him speechless. Many players around were stunned, wondering if it was the breath of a dragon or some unexpected event. In the midst of the chaos, even our protagonist was frozen in disbelief. Because of one tiny mistake, the entire continent had cracked open. That day, a new record was set in the world of virtual games. The number of players defeated in a single instant by one attack, over 850,617.
Your attack times 5.
Amid all that chaos, our protagonist remembered every insult, every betrayal, every humiliation, everything he had suffered since he started this game. And now, thanks to that stick, those who once looked down on him, it was finally their turn to pay with their lives. Outside the game, in real life, our protagonist is just a perfectly normal young boy. Not really good at sports and not particularly outstanding in his school grades either. If you had to sum up his life in terms of video games, you could even say he's Bronze 4. Meanwhile, in the game's starting city, a barefoot man was advancing. It was indeed our protagonist, walking with his big solid stick in his hand. His face expressionless and calm, but as he walked he had struck someone. That man immediately got angry and grabbed and lifted our protagonist, asking what was wrong with him. But his wife behind him told him not to scare the little boy too much. Our protagonist remained calm for a moment, then called the man a fat pig and told him to let him go. Hearing that, the man wanted to react, but a light blow from the stick to his cheek calmed him down. The man looked at the stick on his cheek for a moment and asked the idiot if he wanted to die, but his sentence wasn't even finished. He was already far away among the stars. His wife didn't understand what had just happened, but seeing our protagonist with his wooden stick in hand, she began to tremble. Our protagonist could only smile, because at that moment in the game, he had become the most powerful player on the entire server. But as his confidence swelled, a system notification snapped him back to reality.
Wooden stick +99. Durability 3 out of 5 remaining. Weapon irreparable.
Our protagonist couldn't believe what he saw. While the day seemed to be going well in the city, our protagonist was in an alley still thinking about the system notification.
Wooden stick +99. A basic weapon for beginners. Its durability is very low, and it will break after a few strikes. Durability 3 out of 5. Weapon irreparable.
Our protagonist stared at his stick for a moment. Then he collapsed to the ground because he had foolishly used his stick twice without knowing it only had 5 uses. He thought to himself that everything was over because he hadn't been able to get revenge on all who humiliated and betrayed him. He had ruined everything himself. All this really started to anger him. He immediately got up. He made a decision. If he only had 3 strikes left, he already knew where to go. Somewhere in the night, in a valley filled with human skeletons, our protagonist advanced with determination, his stick in hand, murmuring to himself. Suddenly, thunder began to crash down, which made our protagonist stop. He remained impassive and expressionless in the face of it all. At that same moment, an explosion rang out in front of him. Through the smoke, the face of a monster became visible. It then spread its wings, letting loose an immense aura. But through all of that, our protagonist remained impassive in the face of the monster's show of strength.
A mortal whose days are numbered. You dare cross the borders of death. This place is the crossroads between life and death. Foolish mortal. Your despair will have no cure.
After seeing what had happened to his second head, Uru stopped speaking, not understanding what had just occurred. Meanwhile, our protagonist was still standing after delivering that powerful blow. He thought that if he only had 3 strikes left, his choice was made, so he would use them on the most powerful boss in the game. Urus was terrified to know his end was near. Urus then wanted to negotiate.
Wait.
What?
I have something to tell you. Wait a moment, boss.
Boss? Didn't you call me a foolish mortal just a moment ago?
Boss is the script I was given. I can't help it. Who are you really?
I don't know, man. Just die quickly.
Our protagonist struck Urus again with his stick, hitting him full force, and Urus collapsed to the ground, agonizing from the impact. His face had even changed in terror. After using nearly all his strikes, only 1 hit remained. Our protagonist said aloud that everything would have been great if only his weapon had better durability. Urus was surprised to hear that. He asked if durability was his only problem, and if so, he had a solution. Just as the boy was about to strike, he stopped after hearing that. Suddenly, a notification appeared before him.
Contract of servitude with Urus the two-headed dragon, the most powerful of dragons. Urus wishes to cede his soul to you. Do you accept this request?
He then asked Urus what the contract was for. Urus asked if he knew the Sword of Ego, but our protagonist was confused, wondering what that was. Urus told him that if he gave up his body and transferred his spirit into his weapon, the weapon would become an ego weapon and would gain infinite durability. Our protagonist was surprised, shocked to hear that. Urus said it corresponded to the highest rank of weapons in Chrono Life, but our protagonist began to smile. Urus was afraid and didn't know what he had said that was so funny. He then asked if the boy liked his proposal. Our protagonist thought to himself that he had lost all hope of revenge, but life insisted that he fulfill it. Urus didn't know what to do in this situation, but our protagonist told him he was ready to sign the contract. After clicking accept, a magic circle began to form on the ground. Urus's body began to evaporate before him. It then began to enter our protagonist's wooden stick. The stick started to emit an incredible aura. Wooden stick plus 99, ego rank. Remaining durability, infinite. Our protagonist was very happy about what had happened, but at the same moment, several monsters began to approach. All of them cried vengeance for their master. They all wanted our protagonist's head. All of Urus's minions were ready to take the life of this insolent human who had appeared before them. A legion of monsters began to approach dangerously, while our protagonist merely smiled. He grinned wildly and lifted his stick, ready to strike. A great explosion reverberated across the continent. After these events, in the starting city, a poster was placed with a head offered for a bounty in the town square. Everyone in the square didn't really understand the situation, but the guard told them it was a national SSS level wanted notice, because this individual had committed the greatest PK crime in history. The poster was distributed in all the cities, down every alley, and the bounty was 10 billion gold. Everyone present was shocked, because that was more than $700,000 in real life. At that same moment, footsteps echoed in the distance. Soldiers in armor marched in, bearing banners with golden phoenix motifs. The players present were surprised to see these soldiers with that emblem on their armor, because it was the Royal Guard. And the person at the head of this procession is called Saintly, the mistress of the Sacred Guild, Saintly. At the same moment, soldiers wearing red capes with white cross insignia also passed by. That was the Crossline Guild, led by their guildmaster named Shuho. Then mages began to approach as well. At their head was the most powerful sorceress in the game, Abracadabra. Then soldiers with silver helmets and blue attire appeared. A blue banner was raised in the air, all the soldiers aligned to give passage to a man. The Lord of Castle Arden, master of the Justice Guild, named Hawkeye. Those present couldn't believe it. The 5 greatest guilds in the world had gathered in one place. The Sacred Guild, Crossline, Holy Land, the Invincibles, and the Justice Guild. The very first alliance of the 5 greatest guilds in the world.
I address you as the head of the World Guild Union. Our alliance declares war on this ruthless killer.
During this time, our protagonist was looking at his wooden staff, which had evolved to eagle rank with infinite durability. That made the boy smile, because with this staff, he could finally fulfill his revenge. But at the same moment, a head appeared on the staff, startling him. He was shocked to see his staff with a head, but the strange apparition told him that it was Eurus, the 2-headed dragon he had defeated earlier. Our protagonist was stunned to hear that. He couldn't understand how that was possible, but Eurus told him that he was now the spirit of his weapon, and only he could see him. Our protagonist told him he had changed, because he seemed much gentler now. He then asked him where his second head was. Obviously, that question remained unanswered. Their discussion was interrupted by a poster falling from the sky. He decided to pick it up, to see what it was about, but to his great surprise, it was him, and several other posters were falling from the sky as well. As he walked down the street, on every corner and wall, his picture was posted with a bounty on it. Eurus told him that he was really strong because, in a single strike, he had killed more than 800,000 people. Eurus said he looked awesome because his head was now worth over $700,000 in real money. But our protagonist asked if it wasn't forbidden for NPCs to talk about the outside world of the game. Eurus replied that there was no problem. After all, he was already dead. He asked him what he planned to do now, because with more than 10 billion gold on his head, everyone would want him dead. He told him to take advantage of this opportunity to become evil. But while walking, our protagonist felt that the city was far too quiet, much more than usual. Still, he didn't care. It actually made him feel quite famous. He then told Eurus that he would have to stay in the shadows for a while, but Eurus didn't understand why that decision. He told him that he was already too powerful and now also wanted. Eurus couldn't understand why humans were such sore losers, but our protagonist said that's what made it funny, actually, because people now despised him for becoming so overpowered. But suddenly, an arrow pierced our protagonist. Eurus couldn't understand what had just happened at that moment. The arrow had gone through his body, making him spit blood. Then he collapsed to the ground, in front of Eurus, who kept calling out to him, while a man standing on a rooftop said he had just hit the target. That man was none other than Hawkeye, the commander-in-chief of the 5 greatest guilds. Soldiers advanced from all sides as our protagonist lay still on the ground. Archers were posted on rooftops everywhere, all aiming at him. Hawkeye then ordered all his soldiers to arrest that man, the one who had killed more than 800,000 players, and to imprison him. Eurus didn't know what to do. He tried to wake up our protagonist but failed. Meanwhile, all the players around began to surround him, but our protagonist started to get back up despite the pain from the arrow. He managed to stand, and all the players stood ready to shoot at that monster. Hawkeye told them to move in and give him no mercy. All the soldiers started attacking our protagonist in the center. Eurus told them to do something, or else they would die. This situation was really starting to anger him. He pulled out the arrow that was stuck in his back, then threw it to the ground. He gripped his staff tightly. As the soldiers were about to strike him, our protagonist told them they had wished for it. Then at that very moment, a huge explosion echoed through the entire city, and could even be seen from other distant cities. All the soldiers were knocked out. Hawkeye coughed in the smoke of the explosion. He wondered what had just happened, because he had only seen a flash in an instant. The entire city had been destroyed in a single attack. Hawkeye couldn't believe his eyes because the capital of the First Kingdom had just been erased from the map. He was terrified as our protagonist now stood before him, with his staff on his shoulder. Hawkeye couldn't even move because in front of him stood a monster. He then reached into his pocket and took out a one-use summoning crystal. He crushed it in his hand, and a magic circle began to form around him. Then several more appeared.
Members of the Alliance, answer my call. Mass teleportation. Large-scale summon.
Several soldiers from different guilds began to appear, in huge numbers, after their commander's call. Our protagonist simply watched in silence, because at that very moment, thousands of soldiers had surrounded him. The World Guild Union, with more than 3 million soldiers, had been summoned in an instant. Hawkeye pointed his finger at our protagonist and ordered everyone to attack. All the soldiers rushed toward our protagonist at high speed, but he simply sighed, then raised his staff in the air, ready to strike. A single blow shattered one side of the battalion's ranks. Several players were eliminated with that single strike. Urus was shocked by such power. Then he swung his staff again, and once more, countless players were wiped out. Urus couldn't believe it. None of this made any sense. Even when he was alive, he couldn't have faced that many players at once, especially the World Guild Union. Despite their defeat, the soldiers were determined to finish off our protagonist. He dashed toward them in a majestic motion, ready to cut them down. But he simply smiled at the scene. Then, with one single strike, he annihilated them all. Meanwhile, Abracadabra, the most powerful mage of the kingdom, was chanting an incantation with her teammates. Our protagonist noticed a light above his head. She had just cast the spell of ancient disintegration magic. The circle began to fill with energy, leaving our protagonist amazed by the scene. The spell activated, releasing massive energy toward him. As the immense power approached, he lowered his staff, then raised it instantly. The strike was so powerful that it was visible even outside the globe. The magic circle began to crack and then shatter. The mage couldn't believe it. A high-level spell had just been broken with a single hit. Without wasting time, she asked the mages to prepare another spell, but she suddenly saw the boy raise his staff. Then, in one blow, all the mages were swept away and annihilated. That day, a single player faced more than 3 million gathered players. The World Union of the 5 greatest guilds was completely annihilated. Out of more than 3 million, only one player remained alive, defeated and terrified before him. The impossible had just happened. Our protagonist now stood before him. He told him that he had let him live on purpose because of him. He had deliberately held back his strength. Hawkeye didn't understand why he hadn't killed him like the others, but our protagonist said it was obvious, because earlier, he was the one who had shot him with the arrow in the back. Hawkeye finally understood what awaited him. He was struck by a powerful blow that nearly destroyed part of the globe. The battle of that day became the talk of many, not only among Chrono Life players, but also gamers all around the world, and even those who usually didn't care about games. Our protagonist looked at his staff for a moment. Urus then appeared and told him he was truly incredible, a real display of power. But at that same moment, someone seemed to be approaching him. He turned around to see, because after all those players fallen in battle, could there still be any alive? But our protagonist couldn't believe his eyes, because the person walking toward him, time itself seemed to stop, because this meeting had no witnesses. Our protagonist couldn't believe what he was seeing, for the person in front of him was none other than the girl who had coldly killed him. She smiled for a moment, then asked him how he had been since that time. At that moment, the sun was setting over a vast field of bodies and weapons all planted on the battlefield. More than 3 million corpses scattered across the ground. Our protagonist couldn't believe it. These reunions. He remained silent for a moment, still thinking about all the insults she had directed at his parents. He tightened his grip on his staff. Anger began to rise within him, but he smiled, trying to hide everything he felt. The girl asked him how he was doing. She said it was quite a coincidence. She hadn't expected to see him in such a place. Our protagonist told her he didn't believe in that so-called coincidence. It was obvious she was here to look for him. She smiled and asked if it was really that obvious. He told her he wanted to hit her with all his strength right then, but that would wait a little. He asked why her hair had changed color. The girl told him she was glad he'd noticed, because she had managed to evolve that same day she killed him, into the hidden class of Goddess of Life. Then her hair had suddenly taken that color. He looked at her for a moment and sighed. He then asked if killing 1,000 people shouldn't have made her a goddess of death rather than a goddess of life. She replied that it was rather amusing, wasn't it? Irritated, our protagonist told her if she liked saying such nonsense before delivering a blow she easily avoided. He told her he'd had enough listening to her. It was time she got beaten. She asked if he was sure about that. From afar, a huge light could be seen. It was our protagonist striking again. He thought the problem was already solved. But she said that was a shame, because she had plenty of things to tell him. He abruptly turned and struck, destroying everything around. Urus was very pleased to see that. He said the hit was right on target. He thought people like her only talked a lot for nothing. But as the smoke cleared, he saw a silhouette. He couldn't believe it. His strike had destroyed everything behind, but hadn't even touched her. She smiled and told him he had become very powerful since their last meeting, but that was still not enough to kill her. Urus was shocked that after such a blow she was still alive. The girl simply smiled at him. Urus was startled because it felt like she had just looked him in the eyes, since besides her master, no one else can see him. Our protagonist found this strange because he was sure he had hit her, yet she was still there. She told him she had already told him a moment ago. She had evolved to the rank of goddess of life, and the strikes of a mere mortal cannot kill a deity. He found that rather interesting because it angered him even more. In an instant he moved at full speed, ready to hit her, but she remained motionless. His blow hit, but nothing happened. He decided to strike again and again. Mountains were devastated and the shockwave could be seen at the other end of the globe. Urus couldn't believe it because, according to him, she should have disappeared without a trace. But the girl told him it was useless. She deployed her wings and began to float, looking down on our protagonist from above. Urus was astonished while the boy was short of breath, catching his breath. The girl's wings began to fade and she descended majestically to the ground. She smiled and told him it was useless to keep trying for nothing. She walked forward and told him to give up because even if he had become very strong, he could not kill her. It was totally impossible. But the boy looked at her for a moment, then closed his eyes and sighed, then turned and began to leave, leaving the girl standing there. She asked him if he had finally decided to give up, but the boy felt himself heating up for a moment. He told her he was going to strike with all his strength now. The girl told him it was pointless, because even if he struck with all his strength, he could not touch her. But the boy said he didn't intend to hit her. He was going to try to destroy this planet. The girl was silent for a moment, then asked him to repeat what he had just said. Our protagonist told her that if he could not annihilate her, he would just annihilate the whole planet. And once the planet was destroyed, either she would die or she would be flung to the other end of the universe. The girl asked if he really thought a mere mortal like him could do such a thing, but he told her she hadn't listened properly. He was going to strike with all his strength. Up until now, he had never truly struck with all his might. She warned him that if he did that, he would also die in the process, because it was foolish. Would it satisfy him? He smiled for a moment and said there was one thing girls of her kind didn't understand. You don't provoke those who have nothing left to lose. Seeing the danger approaching, the girl told him to wait a moment, but it was too late because he had already struck the ground with his staff. The earth began to tremble. She couldn't believe it, and Urus was also stunned by the display of power. The ground fractured into many pieces and spread across the globe, followed by a massive explosion that destroyed everything, even erasing all traces of the planet. Meanwhile, in the virtual reality halls, all players were disconnected at the same time. Players didn't understand why they had all been suddenly ejected from the game. They all turned to the administrator, furious. At the same time, an announcement was posted on the official game site, a public notice concerning all players. While all players were ejected from the game, a single capsule remained closed with a player still inside. Meanwhile, in the game, several notifications kept appearing one after another, informing that across the entire server, there remained only a single person connected. Our protagonist was then transported to a place he himself didn't really understand. There was nothing around him except a blue space and numbers floating all around. He scratched his head wondering where he was now, because a moment ago he had been in the game. But a voice behind him surprised him. The man told him that the star he had destroyed was called ST-389, and it had been the most beautiful of planets. He asked him why he had done that, because his mother truly loved that place. But the boy looked at him for a moment before asking who he was. The man paused a moment and then told him he was God. Our protagonist stayed silent for a moment. Then he smiled and said that, anyway, he didn't care about the man's identity. He could keep it to himself. But he asked if he had seen a girl with slightly brown hair around. The man replied no, that there were only the two of them here and no one else was present. He had just received a system notification telling him that he was the only player still connected on the entire server. The man then told him not to be surprised, because he was indeed the one who had destroyed everything on the planet, and that he was the one who had killed them all. But the boy suddenly started smiling, which surprised the man. He didn't understand why he had begun smiling like that. Our protagonist was actually happy, because his revenge was complete. He then asked Urus to come out for a moment to see, because they had succeeded, but nothing happened. He tried to wake him with a few taps, but still, nothing. The man told him he was wasting his time calling him, because they were the only two left now, and that meant his little Urus no longer existed either. He then asked if he was the only player still connected. Then who was this man standing here with him? Was he an NPC or an administrator? But he was neither. And when the man tried to say his name, something seemed to stop him from speaking. He smiled slightly and said it seemed someone outside was already interfering with their conversation. A bright light suddenly appeared before them. Our protagonist was surprised to see it appear so suddenly. The man said it was a shame, but it didn't matter. They were destined to meet today. And he told him to say hello to the hairy one for him. But our protagonist told him to wait a second. However, both of them started to disappear at the same time. Then a notification appeared, saying he had been disconnected from the game. Meanwhile, in the arcade hall, his capsule had just opened with the boy sitting inside. He began removing his headset, visibly angry. He thought that man hadn't told him much, and had just left like that. He then wondered, who was the hairy one he was talking about? At that very moment, a man dressed in white, a cigar in his mouth, stood up from his seat and walked toward him. The man stopped in front of him and asked if he was the one using the wooden staff plus 99 in the game. The boy, surprised, said yes, that was him. Then he asked who the man was. The man replied that he was the one who came to take back the wooden staff plus 99. Later, in a city restaurant, plates of food were served on the table. Our protagonist sat across from the man in white, sharing a meal. The man told him to eat, otherwise his food would get cold. The boy, trembling, slowly began to eat. The man said he used to come here often when he was still poor, and that 15 years had passed since then, since he had created his company, Chrono Life. The boy was surprised and asked who he really was. The man replied that he was Choi Dokbae, the CEO of Chrono Life, and all the men in suits behind him were company employees. Our protagonist felt relieved. He had thought they were gangsters. He then asked why the CEO of Chrono Life had come in person to see him, but the man told him he had already said it. He came to retrieve the wooden staff plus 99. Our protagonist didn't understand why he wanted to take it back. The man explained that it was a system bug and that it was normal for gaming companies to retrieve bugged items. But the boy disagreed. He said it wasn't a bugged item, that he had upgraded it himself. The man replied that the success rate was only 3%. After enhancing his weapon to plus 10, the success rate should have been just 3%. He said, "You understand, don't you? Because if it wasn't a bug, can you imagine the odds of you succeeding that far?" A silence fell between the two men. Then the CEO said that from now on, the wooden staff plus 99 would be retrieved by the developers. The next day, back in the game, not far from the city, a team of 4 players faced a huge monster. The monster started attacking. One of the players activated his flaming missile skill. His attack hit the monster directly. The monster began to roar in pain, and his teammate congratulated him. At the same time, one of the team's female members stepped forward to attack, but her teammate shouted for her not to rush in alone. At that moment, the monster struck her and sent her flying through the air, right toward the girl standing at the back of the group. Before she could react, the two collided and fell. Meanwhile, our protagonist watched them from afar, sitting on a hill, wondering what he should do next. While Urus was eating beside him, he asked what he was thinking about, but the boy didn't answer. He was staring at his staff, remembering the conversation he had had with the CEO of Chrono Life when he had said he would take back the wooden staff plus 99. He was visibly angry, but the man had told him that was what the company had decided, though his personal opinion was quite different. Our protagonist was surprised to hear that. The man said that the staff wasn't a system bug, but a creation of his own, and that he wouldn't interfere with his progress so he could keep it. He told him that even if he had killed the strongest boss, slain more than 3 million players, and destroyed a planet, he was still free to make his own choices. He handed him a plate of food and said, "It's up to you to make your own decisions." Back to the present, our protagonist was still staring at his staff, but a noise pulled him out of his thoughts. It came from the team he'd seen earlier. One of the players was furious with the brawler girl who had attacked the monster recklessly. Because of her, they had lost the boss fight. Watching this, our protagonist remembered the CEO's final words, telling him to stop destroying everything and instead to enjoy the game like everyone else. The player spat on the girl's body, telling her she was kicked out of the group. The team then left, abandoning the girl behind. She stayed there for a moment, silent. Seeing that, our protagonist thought she resembled him a lot, but in this game, only the law of the strongest mattered. Then, suddenly, the girl began shouting, cursing the game and the players who had left her. According to her, they were all useless and didn't even recognize real equipment. She was furious. She had spent so much money buying good gear for this game. Determined, she decided to keep playing alone, without any team. From afar, our protagonist watched her walk away, but after only a few steps, she realized something. In front of her stood a group of monsters that had appeared out of nowhere. She froze in fear as they surrounded her. At that moment, the monsters charged toward her. Not knowing what to do, she closed her eyes, thinking it was the end. But just as everything seemed lost, our protagonist was already standing in front of her. He raised his staff, ready to strike. As the monsters neared, he swung upward, so powerfully that the shockwave was visible even from space. After wiping out all the monsters, the frightened girl behind him slowly opened her eyes. Realizing that nothing had happened to her, she was still alive. Then she was shocked to see someone standing in front of her, when just a second ago there was no one there. Our protagonist turned toward her and asked gently, "Would you like to form a party with me?" The girl told him to get lost because she doesn't team up with a noob. Then she turned around and started walking away, leaving our protagonist confused by the situation. Meanwhile, in the real world, no one could believe what had just happened. Recent events in Chrono Life had shocked everyone. The news had spread all over the world, and the internet had named that day Doomsday, the day of final judgment. Everyone was debating the situation. Some thought he was just a cheater who probably had an item that made the game bug. Everyone wanted him expelled and banned from the game forever. But amid all the tension, the game's main administration finally decided to publish an official statement, saying that this player had not cheated and that he was completely legitimate. And just like that, the debate was closed with a single announcement. Meanwhile, back in the game, our protagonist was quite happy, walking behind the same player from earlier, but she was clearly annoyed and turned around to ask why he had been following her all this time. He replied that it was obvious, since they were now a team. But the girl angrily asked when exactly they had become a team. She told him she couldn't form a team with a guy walking around in his underwear and carrying only a beginner's stick as a weapon. After that, the girl said she didn't team up with beginners, then turned around to leave. But our protagonist didn't understand. Hadn't he just saved her from all those monsters? Then Urus told him he had seen everything. At the moment he was fighting, she had closed her eyes, so she hadn't seen anything at all. Our protagonist thought to himself, "So she doesn't even know I'm super strong?" He decided it was the perfect moment to be secretly overpowered. Then he started running after the girl to try to catch up with her. Once he was in front of her, he said he wanted her to boost his level, but she asked what he meant by that. The protagonist then said that in reality, he was new to the game and begged her to help him level up, since she looked like a real pro. But when she heard him call her a pro, the girl still didn't believe it. Then Urus asked what he was doing, and he replied that he was pretending to be weak in order to stay secretly strong. Urus really wondered why he needed to do such a foolish thing. The girl finally said fine, because as a pro player, she had to help new players in the game. At that moment, our protagonist received a message saying that the player Love had invited him to her group. She told him she would help him this time. After all, she was a professional. A few minutes later, inside a dungeon, The young girl attacked a level 4 bear rabbit and managed to knock it down in a single blow. At that same moment, another one was about to attack from behind, but she dodged easily. Performing a mid-air spin, she prepared a kick, and she struck the rabbit with all her strength using her dragon dive technique. She knocked it out instantly, then turned toward the other monsters, asking, "Who's next?" While the battle continued, our protagonist was sitting in a corner. He thought to himself that she seemed pretty skilled in combat. Urus told him not to worry. Her equipment was of very high quality. Just her weapon alone was worth more than 10 million gold, about $7,000. But our protagonist didn't understand how she had such gear if she had also just started the game. Urus replied that it was obvious. She had bought it. That shocked him. She had spent over $7,000 just for simple equipment. At that moment, the girl walked up to him and asked why he was just sitting there. He could at least lend a hand. He could at least hit the monsters with his stick. He asked again if he really needed to hit them with his stick. She said yes. You can only level up by fighting, not by hiding all the time. As she spoke, a monster approached, but our protagonist just touched it with his stick, and in an instant, it was disintegrated. The girl turned around confused, wondering why there was suddenly wind in the dungeon. Behind her, our protagonist thought, "I'm screwed." But at that same moment, the girl received an important notification message, telling her to disconnect right away. It was urgent. Looking a bit worried, she finally said she had to log out for a while because she had something important to take care of, but she'd be back soon. As she vanished, she told him to keep training while she was gone to level up faster. He thought she was weird. She just came and went from the game whenever she wanted. Meanwhile, back in the real world, the girl was lying on a bed with her headset on. She had just logged out and removed it from her head, revealing her face. She started thinking again about that player she had met in the game, then smiled for a moment. But suddenly, the door opened. A woman entered, visibly angry. She asked why she still had her headset on. Was she trying to ruin her career? Then she told her to sit down because they had less than 10 minutes to get ready. Noticing she was still wearing her glasses, she got even angrier. She'd told her many times not to play with glasses under her headset. But the girl replied that without her glasses, she felt very anxious. And she was really good at makeup, so the marks from the glasses wouldn't even show. The woman just sighed and told her to sit down. There wasn't much time left. She laid out her makeup tools, then began applying makeup. After the makeup session, she removed the elastic holding the girl's hair. She was finally ready. A few minutes later, on stage, fans were cheering loudly to see her at the microphone, since her last single had stayed at the top spot for 13 weeks. She was a renowned singer, an idol in the music industry. Meanwhile, back in the game, several bear rabbits were heading toward our protagonist, but he just smiled and said he should train a bit before the girl from earlier returned. Urus was confused, asking why he needed more training. He said he had to practice looking weaker in front of her, and he called this training hit without killing. A huge explosion followed, but not far away, the game administrator was amazed by his training. Hit without killing. He found this player really interesting, with everything he was doing in the game. Meanwhile, on stage, Hanserong was performing perfectly. From the age of 16, while still in high school, she had already become a singer at a very young age, and after a long period of anonymity, she finally managed to rise and establish herself as the #1 singer and best lyricist of her time. The journalist warmly congratulated her because her single had now remained at the top spot for over 14 weeks. He then asked her what the secret was behind such captivating song lyrics. She said that she loved being alone and that she read a lot of novels and poetry. The journalist said that's why the lyrics of her songs were so moving, right? She replied that it was a bit embarrassing because it was somewhat childish. In front of such innocence, both the journalist and the audience were completely charmed. On the other side of the screen, her manager was sitting with a cup of coffee in her hand, thinking that Hanserong was really good at making all those journalists believe such nonsense. Poems? Fairy tales? She was only saying random stuff, because her real favorite pastime was video games. The journalist then asked her about her talent as an actress, since she had also landed an incredible role in an upcoming drama. The girl stopped talking for a moment, then said to the journalist that she was having a bit of trouble with her next role, because in all her life, she had never said a bad word. Back inside the game, the girl was quite upset. She started kicking our protagonist, telling him that he didn't even welcome his leader back. He was surprised. Since when had she become his leader? She told him it was just since earlier. She then asked if he wasn't happy that she was now his leader. But Urus was exhausted by the scene. He told him to just get rid of that rude girl. But our protagonist replied that he had to keep acting weak while hiding his true strength. The girl started retraining him, telling him to repeat, "Leader love." Seeing this, Urus thought that he was really trapped by his own silly plan. After that, the two continued advancing deeper into the dungeon. She asked him how his training went while she was gone. He replied that it took him a lot of effort, almost an eternity, but Urus thought it was so boring to hit without killing. Still, our protagonist told him to stay quiet. The girl said she couldn't wait to see him in action. Then she asked what his name was. But before he could answer, she said he didn't need to. From now on, she'd call him the Slip. As they walked deeper into the dungeon, someone seemed to be watching them from afar. Several men were hiding behind rocks, observing them. The leader of the group said to his men that he had found her. The others asked what they should do. He told them he'd gather the entire guild in this dungeon. They were going to take revenge on that girl. On the protagonist's side, a wild bear rabbit suddenly appeared, and the girl told him to attack. As he approached, he suddenly stopped mid-run. Even the monster didn't understand why he had stopped. He walked closer, confused by what was happening. His staff barely brushed the creature's fur, yet it was violently blown away, collapsing with only 1 point of HP left. Our protagonist couldn't believe it. He had just succeeded with his hit without killing technique. The girl began to congratulate him, saying he was getting strong. But suddenly, a weapon came flying toward them. The girl noticed it just in time. She grabbed the boy and deflected the sword with her kick, sending it back toward the attacker and cutting his cheek. The man said she was good, though her equipment helped her a lot. The girl asked who he was. The man asked if she had really forgotten his voice. She immediately recognized them. They were from the Hala Mountain Guild. He said it had been a long time since they last met. Then he ordered his men to attack, and they began closing in, ready for battle. The girl turned to our protagonist, telling him to step back because it was dangerous. She got ready to fight. 2 men approached. She noticed instantly. She pushed off the ground and delivered a powerful kick to one of them. Then she used his head as leverage to jump into the air, spun around, and activated her dragon dive kick technique, smashing the ground and taking out all the enemies who attacked her. Meanwhile, our protagonist was sitting in a corner watching the whole scene, still not understanding what exactly was happening before his eyes. But now he began to realize the situation. Love had a past feud with the Hala Guild members, but even with all their attempts, they had never managed to defeat her. She had taken most of them down, and the leader, seeing she was distracted by the fight, ordered the girl beside him to attack. In an instant, she disappeared, then reappeared behind Love. She reached out her hand, saying the word, "Steal." A blinding light appeared as Love shielded her eyes. Then she realized her gloves were gone. The thief was already holding them, saying they were high quality, and asking if Love was rich. Our protagonist was shocked to see such a skill, but Urus explained it was the steal ability of the thief class. Still, Urus found it strange. That ability shouldn't be able to steal items like that. But the protagonist said it was fine. He didn't really have anything valuable that could be stolen. Then, after glancing at his staff, he realized he actually did have something that could be stolen. He immediately stood up, confusing the 2 girls. Suddenly, he started running away with his staff. The guild leader thought he wasn't even worth chasing. He had nothing useful anyway. But as he neared the exit, the thief girl handed the gloves back to her leader, saying he didn't understand anything, because stealing from those who have nothing was much more exciting. Then she teleported right in front of our protagonist, asking where he thought he was going. She stretched her arm forward to take the staff. Our protagonist had no choice. He decided not to hold back anymore and to use his full strength. As he was about to strike, when the smoke cleared, his staff had vanished from his hands. The thief girl stood before him, smiling, saying that from now on, the staff belonged to her. Our protagonist suddenly realized the huge mistake he had just made. The girl told him she would also steal his cape, leaving him with only his underwear. But then she wondered, what was that shadow appearing before her?
What an insolent human. How could something as insignificant as you try to possess me?
Seeing that, the girl was terrified and threw the staff to the ground. Our protagonist looked at it for a moment, before stepping forward to pick it up. The system then informed him that he had become the owner of the weapon again, since Urus's spirit had rejected his enemy's attempt to possess it. Urus appeared, wondering how that girl could have believed she could control him so easily, but our protagonist, expressionless, stayed calm for a moment before placing his hand on Urus's head and gently patting him. The frightened girl, still shaken by what had happened, wondered if everything she saw was real, because it all seemed too vivid to be an illusion. But in the distance, her leader called out, asking why she was hesitating all of a sudden. Had she forgotten her mission? The girl immediately stood up, saying she hadn't forgotten what she was supposed to do. At that same moment, she sensed something and quickly ducked, avoiding a surprise attack from Love. Clearly angry, Love demanded that she return her equipment, but just as she was about to attack, the girl told her she was mistaken. Those gloves were already somewhere else, she no longer had them. When she turned around to counterattack, she was struck on the head and instantly lost consciousness. Our protagonist had used his technique, strike without killing, to knock her out for a short time. The girl then asked why he had done that. Weren't they supposed to be allies? He simply replied that it was because he was secretly OP. The girl didn't really understand what he meant. Then, at that same moment, a loud explosion echoed behind her. "Let's take down all their allies." The girl turned around and saw all her comrades unconscious. She asked our protagonist if he was the one who did that. Instead of an answer, she received a light blow to the head. He told her that yes, he was the one responsible for all of it. The girl fell to the ground, her life bar almost empty. Our protagonist told her that a lot had happened to him recently, and he had managed to endure it all. But because of her and her team, he almost had a heart attack. He then gave her another strong but controlled hit, knocking her out completely. After these events, Love was lying on the ground. When she opened her eyes, she immediately stood up. Our protagonist asked her if she had slept well. She was a bit surprised to see him again, especially since he was calmly eating. She then asked him where they were now and where everyone else had gone. He told her they had all left. She wondered if the girl who had taken her gloves had also left, but right then, her gloves appeared before her eyes. She was a little surprised. Our protagonist asked her if those people were really called the Manhwa Guild. He then told her to explain everything she knew about them. The girl was a little surprised that he asked so suddenly. Then she told him to stop acting so full of himself. She smiled for a moment and said she would tell him anyway, since he was now also involved in this problem. She asked if he had ever heard of the vintage, but our protagonist didn't really understand what that meant. Urus explained that vintage came from the words vintage and lineage, and that it was even the name of a very popular online game. He then asked Urus how he knew that, since he was just an NPC in the game. Urus said he had done some research online. Love then explained that, simply put, the vintage were people who spent enormous amounts of money on games. He asked if all those who had just attacked them were part of the vintage. Love replied yes, they were indeed members of that group. A few months ago, she had obtained those gloves at an auction, and since then, they kept appearing, trying to take them from her. Love asked him how he managed to get the gloves back. Did he steal them too? But she just said that no matter how he got them, one thing was certain, they would return again, because that man with the black lip never gives up. But our protagonist said he found it strange. Why did they all want those gloves so badly? Love said it was obvious. Those gloves were worth more than $7,000. But he said that was exactly what made it strange. Those people spent so much money in the game, so why would they care so much about a simple pair of gloves? There had to be a deeper reason behind all this. A few hours later, at nightfall, inside a hidden base deep in the forest, the man with the black lip from earlier had just been defeated by a sword strike. He was on his knees, begging his master for another chance, but she told him to be silent. He was useless. She would give the mission to someone else, since he couldn't even handle such a small task. At that moment, noises came from behind. 3 individuals dressed in extremely expensive gear appeared. One of them said that from the start, the man didn't even deserve to be in their group, since he had spent less than $74,000. Another spoke up, saying the leader was too kind. He should never have accepted him into the guild. The third said he would take care of it himself, claiming he could recover the gloves in just 1 day. Hearing that, the leader began smiling widely and said he could go ahead, and that soon, everyone would fear the Manhwa Guild. The Festival of Blood had now begun, but at that moment, our protagonist was standing quietly behind them, listening. A silence filled the air. Then he started mocking them, saying their name Guardians sounded too lame. The guild leader asked who he was and where he came from, but he simply replied that they should figure it out themselves. Then he said, "You call yourselves the Guardians, right? Then finish this quickly, instead of wasting time." The leader looked at him for a moment, called him a fool, and ordered his men to attack. As they all charged at him, our protagonist just smiled, and with a single move, pushed two of them back. The third tried to attack, but received a strong hit in the stomach and instantly lost consciousness. Meanwhile, as our protagonist fought those players, a familiar silhouette was slowly approaching the place where the battle was taking place. As she advanced slowly, an explosion rang out ahead. At the house on the hill, the house was now split in two. She stopped for a moment, then smiled. Meanwhile, the order had been given to all the members of the Hala Guild to attack our protagonist, and as everyone rushed at him, he sighed for an instant, then tightened his grip on his staff. He thought to himself that if anyone really wanted to try to beat him, they would at least need to gather more than 3 million players to even hope to stand a chance. He was ready to strike, and his first blow hit one of the players in the head so hard that the man spun through the air. But it didn't stop there. He continued chaining attacks, managing to cover the distance from where he stood. The guildmaster couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was impossible for one man to defeat everyone in just a few minutes. One of his subordinates snapped him out of his thoughts, telling him to flee or their whole guild would be defeated. But the leader was furious to hear that. Their guild was full of players who spent vast sums. Even newcomers had spent more than $7,000 in the game. So who exactly was this man? How could he have annihilated them so easily? Then it hit him. The player destroying the guild by himself was the same man whose head had a bounty of over 10 billion gold. When he noticed that the man was only wearing underwear and wielding a wooden staff, memories of his childhood returned, back to when he first played video games in primary school. Games back then were nothing like the titles now, but they were fun. He'd play all night, and even spend weekends at cybercafes with his friends. Time passed, he grew older, and got too busy to dive back into games. Years later, over 40 now, one of his associates brought him an old console, one of the models he used to play as a kid. He asked why he'd requested such an outdated console when technology had moved on, but he said it was sentimental value. He was thrilled to play those old titles again, but to his surprise, everything had changed. He decided to buy expensive gear to boost his strength and reputation in games. He tried many games, but they were all the same, until he tried a new game, Chrono Life. He created a team that made him nearly invincible. But that day, a single blow from our protagonist was enough to render him unconscious and knock him out. His subordinate was worried about his leader's condition. Our protagonist told him that this was the end of their guild. They should stop bothering love with their nonsense. Then he turned and began to leave. The trembling guild leader slowly rose behind our protagonist and asked if it was really him who had annihilated the 5 greatest guilds in the world and eliminated over 3 million players in a single day. Our protagonist just stared at him without speaking. The man began to smile, then asked how much he had spent in the game to become so powerful. What kind of gear had he bought? Our protagonist only looked at him and finally said he'd only spent about $40. The man was speechless at that answer. Our protagonist then turned and walked away, leaving the 2 men there. Alone, the leader burst out laughing loudly. His subordinate didn't understand why he'd suddenly started to laugh. He asked how many games they had tried so far. His subordinate replied they'd tried at least 8 different games. Grinning, the leader said this game was really interesting. A voice behind him echoed that Chrono Life was indeed intriguing. She greeted them and asked how they had been since they last met. She hadn't come to visit before, so why find this mess now? She wanted to know how preparations were going. He said preparations were going well, but that he'd decided to stop everything and not cooperate with her anymore. She looked at him for a moment, smiled, then struck him with her sword. Her subordinate was terrified. Their leader had been cut down. She told him she was going to ask why, but she was too angry today, so she would just finish them off. At that moment, she thrust her staff through the man on the ground. She smiled, and her hair and entire appearance began to change. The girl started to recall the last words our protagonist had said about love, and she smiled. As our protagonist was walking, he was suddenly surprised by 2 system notifications. The system congratulated him because he had just reached the maximum level, but he wondered what that message meant. What did maximum level really mean? He began checking his status bar to see what was actually happening. Neither he nor Urus could believe it, because he had suddenly reached level 999. Meanwhile, during a TV broadcast, a reporter asked a professional Chrono Life player if it was possible to reach the maximum level in the game. The pro replied that it was impossible to access that level. Even if every player decided to play 24 hours a day, no one could reach that level. It was considered the master's level, and it would take many years for a player to get there. Back in the game, our protagonist couldn't believe what he was seeing before him, but Urus was overjoyed. He was the first player in the world to reach the master's level. Our protagonist was lost. He didn't really understand why everything had suddenly changed, especially since he had been level 7 not long ago. What our protagonist didn't know was that the first day he acquired the staff, he had accidentally defeated more than 800,000 players. He had also destroyed several dungeons that stood in his path. There were also the points he had gained when he had beaten the most powerful boss in the game, and its army of monsters. Add to that his fight against more than 3 million players, and finally when he destroyed the planet along with all its dungeons, monsters, and players still in the game. That's how he became the first player to reach the master's level. At that same moment, a blinding light began to emanate around him. The system informed him that, since he had reached the master's level, he would now be transported into the realm of transcendence. Meanwhile, on the dungeon plane, Love was lying on the green grass, visibly irritated by something. She was very annoyed because she was bored. Our protagonist had left her alone. He had told her to wait because he wouldn't be long, but he still hadn't returned. Since he had asked about the Hala Guild, he had suddenly gone off and hadn't come back yet. She decided she would wait 1 more hour before logging out of the game. Somewhere on a floating island, in scenery reminiscent of an ancient civilization, our protagonist appeared and wondered where he had spawned this time. He was visibly tired and asked himself why he kept being transported here and there without his consent. It had been the same when he met the man who claimed to be God, and the same when he had met the director of Chrono Life. Suddenly he heard a voice welcoming him. The voice seemed a bit surprised to meet a player so soon, and said he was truly interesting. He explained that his role was to guide the transcended, those who had reached the maximum level. The system informed our protagonist that the entity before him was the god of classes, the guide of the transcended. He began to congratulate our protagonist for reaching the master rank as a beginner class. Urus didn't understand why our protagonist was still considered a beginner class even though he had reached the maximum level in the game. Then he was surprised by a notification telling him he would now ascend to a secret class. A dazzling light began to manifest around our protagonist. Skill runes started to float around him. The first rune, called the Soul of the Sword, integrated into our protagonist's body. Then the Soul of the Shield, the Soul of the Bow, and the Soul of the Staff also began to integrate one by one. All the weapon skills merged into his body. Seeing this, our protagonist cracked a smile. Once he descended back to the ground, the system informed him that he had changed class and was now a Master Novice. All the skill points he had accumulated so far would be reset, and his current skill points would be multiplied by 3. The system began recalculating all his skill points and stats. When finished, all those attributes were set to 5, with the option to increase them using his skill points. Urus was shocked. His skill points amounted to more than 14,985. Not only had he obtained a class, but those points were tripled. Our protagonist didn't fully understand why Urus was so surprised by the points as much as by the secret class. Because even if a player managed to reach the maximum level, our protagonist's totals would still be 3 times higher than their levels. But our protagonist didn't react much to the news, which irritated Urus a little. Urus thought that if this became known, he would automatically be a star. He began to spend his points to increase a single skill, just one skill with the points he had obtained. Urus asked what he was doing. He said he was using his points. Urus moved closer to inspect the skill he was improving insistently. Seeing it, Urus was stunned. He couldn't understand why this particular skill was the one he chose to raise. After using all those points, our protagonist said that, for the moment, It was the only skill he needed. Urus muttered that they were doomed. It seemed he had gone completely mad. Meanwhile, in the Chronolife offices, an employee rushed in to inform the director that they had a big problem. The director, who was eating, asked what the problem was. He was told to come quickly because it was about that player again. Surprised, the director followed to see what was wrong. They told him to look at the screen. He was shocked to see that the boy had reached the final level so quickly, but his subordinate said that wasn't the real issue. He should rather look at what the boy was doing right now. The director asked which skill he was increasing. When he saw it, the director began to chuckle openly. His subordinate told him to stop laughing. Now this player was doomed. There was no saving him. The director told him not to worry. In any case, they were developers and not allowed to interfere with players. Then he turned to leave, leaving his subordinate bewildered by the situation. The president mused inwardly that, for the first time in video game history, the worst and the best player had just appeared. Meanwhile, the god of classes asked our protagonist to choose one weapon among all the transcendence weapons in his possession. Our protagonist was clearly delighted to hear that. He wondered which weapon to choose because he found them all very cool. He thought for a moment, then finally decided. He said he wanted them all, but the god of classes told him that, unfortunately, he could not accept that request. He had to choose only one weapon, no more. Our protagonist replied that if the god didn't give them to him, then the god should teach him a good lesson before taking them. Neither Urus nor the attendants behind the screen believed what they had just heard. Even the director was surprised by what he had said. The god of classes was silent for a moment, then immediately became angry. He decided to eliminate our protagonist. Our protagonist was also eager for the fight. Thus, the battle between our protagonist and the god of classes began. As his weapon was dangerously approaching our protagonist, the latter also tightened his grip on his wooden staff. Then, a great explosion echoed through the square, shattering the ground at the same time. Urus was terrified by what he saw, because he thought our protagonist had perished from that attack. The god of classes thought it was disappointing, as he had just punished a transcendent being with his own hands. But just as he was about to finish his sentence, he was suddenly struck by a tremendous force, destroying part of his face. Urus couldn't believe what he was seeing. Our protagonist was still alive, despite the powerful blow he had received. Yet, he seemed very confident, because the skill he had upgraded with all his points was endurance. That skill had granted him a rapid regeneration ability, and he was no longer affected by status effects. When he had maxed out all his points in endurance, he had also unlocked a hidden ability after fulfilling 3 conditions. The first was to reach the master level. The second, the endurance skill had to surpass 14,000 points. And the last, once both were achieved, he needed to endure a certain amount of damage. With this new ability, no matter how much damage he took, his life bar would never decrease. Our protagonist was thrilled to have made this discovery just before the battle began. Meanwhile, the god of classes was writhing in pain from the hit he had taken to the face. Overcome by anger, he launched a laser beam from his eyes, striking our protagonist directly. Urus thought it was all over, seeing our protagonist lying on the ground, but even while on the ground, he simply smiled. He thought to himself that Chronolife was truly the best game ever made, as his wounds began to regenerate. Urus, terrified, wondered if this had suddenly turned into a horror game instead of Chronolife. The god of classes decided to finish it all, but as he attacked, our protagonist let himself be hit, still smiling. His health dropped, only to instantly refill again. The god kept attacking, but our protagonist simply stood there, taking every hit without moving. Then, he asked the god of classes, "Why don't we end this once and for all?" He then thanked him for all the privileges he had obtained through him, but told him to hand over all his weapons and leave far away. The god of classes was irritated to hear this, but our protagonist was already preparing his next attack. He raised his hand and released his signature upward strike. A massive column of energy struck the god of classes. Then, the space of transcendence began to crack and shatter. The system told our protagonist that he was about to be returned to where he came from. At that very moment, far away in the plains, A huge explosion echoed. It was our protagonist descending back, bringing with him all the transcendence weapons of every kind. He simply smiled as all the weapons were automatically stored in his virtual inventory. But while our protagonist was overjoyed, Love was furious and had sworn to hit him the next time she saw him. When our protagonist finally appeared before her, he immediately received a punch to the face. Love said it was already night, even though he had left during the day, but he replied that he thought she had already logged out. She stopped for a moment and said she was leaving. He asked, "Where are you going like that?" She replied, "I'm logging out." Our protagonist told her to have a good night. She stopped again and told him to log in tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. because she'd be online at that time. She warned him not to be late, and then disappeared. Urus then wondered what that look in her eyes had meant. Our protagonist told Urus that he should also log out, as it was getting late in the real world. He logged out. Our protagonist stepped out of the arcade room, exhausted. He thought to himself that he had made great progress again today. He wondered how much he could earn if he sold the weapons he had obtained. When he reached the restaurant, he wanted to eat a good bowl of soup, but when he opened his pouch, he didn't have enough money. Disappointed, he thought he needed to work more at the grocery store to get some cash, but suddenly, he stopped. He realized something. He remembered that Urus had told him that Love's equipment was worth a lot of real money. He then wondered what would happen if he sold his weapons too. He turned around abruptly and ran back to the arcade. He logged back into the game. He immediately went to the Valley of Death, where he had defeated Urus, the most difficult hunting ground in the game, one no player had ever completed. Urus appeared and welcomed him back, but our protagonist ignored him and said he would enjoy his hospitality for a few minutes. Urus, disappointed, told him to do as he pleased. Our protagonist thought he would collect all the weapons in this place, not leaving a single one behind. Suddenly, several monsters began to appear before him. Smiling brightly, our protagonist said to himself, "This day might finally mark the end of my poor life."